Okay, so thank you very much, Andy, and thank you to the Buddhist Library for inviting me to give this series of talks on doom and gloom. So yes, Bhante Akaliko here at Lokanta Vihara, the monastery at the end of the world. So doom and gloom, end of the world, lots of suffering for you to enjoy, and lots of thinking about how to escape about suffering in these two talks this week and next week. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging the original owners and custodians of this land, the Barramadigal people of the Darug Nation, and thinking very much about the topic tonight, which is ups and downs, and we'll be looking at the Lokadharmas and thinking of the suffering of our First Nations people in Australia and First Nations people all over the world, and thinking just how things can change so quickly, and thinking of the history of Aboriginal Australia and colonial Australia, really seeing perhaps the changeability of life, and a real respect to our Indigenous people. So I pay my respects to the leaders and elders, past, present, and emerging. And I also extend that respect to any First Nations people here tonight, or First Nations people everywhere. And so tonight we're looking at ups and downs and doom and gloom. So this was a topic that I chose quite a few months ago now, when we were very deep in the pandemic, and everyone was getting a little bit over it. Everyone was feeling a little bit depressed, a bit lost. There was a lot of uncertainty. And now in Sydney, things have changed a little bit, or a lot. Now it's like the pandemic never really happened. And so people on the street, they seem fine and happy and carefree almost. Today it's Diwali, the celebration of lights, and the area that I live in is in a majority Hindu area. So there's lots of people walking around the streets wearing colourful outfits, nice and happy. And fair warning, often there's these throwdown fireworks that happen. So if you hear noises, sudden noises, or if you see me flinch, I'm not being shot at. It's just the Diwali celebrations. And also today was the Melbourne Cup. There's people walking around celebrating the Melbourne Cup. And it seems like everything is okay, right? We've had our down, and this is our up. And if we're not careful, we might get a bit complacent and think that this is how it's going to be forever. Just like before the pandemic, we thought everything was okay. Then the pandemic came. We realized things actually were quite uncertain after all. And now things are getting back to normal, but the uncertainty is still there. And of course, for all of us, all over the world, at any time, there's pandemics, there's droughts, there's violence, there's wars. And so this uncertainty, this suffering, these ups and downs are happening all the time, globally, socially, in our communities. And then there's the ups and downs in our own lives, the challenges we face, the sufferings we have, traumas, the relationships, the difficulties, our work. Our life is full of ups and downs. And during the pandemic, a lot of people offered some responses to these uncertainties, these sufferings that we experience. There's a lot of talk about mental well-being, mental health, psychological perspectives, and wellness perspectives, looking after your body, exercising, these sorts of things, all of which I commend and endorse. However, if we really want to respond to the uncertainty of life, to the roller coaster of these ups and downs, then we're going to need some strategies which develop wisdom. It's only through seeing clearly, seeing the truth of our situation, that we can appreciate just what's going on and just how important it is to have some release from suffering. And in the Buddhist perspective, a large perspective, we've been having ups and downs for countless lives, wandering about in samsara. And so if we're really concerned about the ups and downs of this life, of this world, then we better get concerned about that big picture and develop some wisdom that leads towards escape. And so that's why I thought of talking tonight about one of my favorite topics, the Lokadharmas, the 8 worldly conditions. But before we get to that, we can do some meditation. And when I was out for a walk today, I was thinking, oh, what meditation shall we do tonight? And I was thinking we can do a meditation that's very calming and peaceful, something that helps us chill out to these ups and downs. And then I thought, well, maybe we can do something that develops wisdom, something that develops some insight into the nature of our experience. And I couldn't decide. So I'm looking for a show of hands. Who thinks something nice and relaxing? And who thinks something a bit more hardcore, insight?
Hardcore.
Hardcore. Okay, well, people have spoken. Okay, good. With a topic like doom and gloom, what was I thinking? People would take the easy way out? No, good. We will do some meditation on the 4 elements. So this practice will help us to see the nature of our body. And when we start to see the ups and downs of our own body, the experience of having a body, and how these things are impermanent, not self, then we can start to appreciate perhaps how the things that occur to us in our life can also be viewed with this kind of detachment, understanding, seeing how these things arise, stay for some time, and pass away. So we'll do a short meditation on the 4 elements. So I invite you to take a comfortable position, something that works for you, either sitting cross-legged on the floor or in a chair. Whatever position you choose, make sure that you are comfortable and that you can sit for 20 minutes. Maybe closing your eyes, allowing yourself to be here, to be here now. And that means letting go. Letting go of the day. Letting go all the activities, all the busyness of your day. Letting go of all the worries, all the problems. We can just let the past be in the past. And not worrying about the future, planning, pondering the future. The future will still be there after the meditation. And so can let go of planning the future. And in this way, letting go of the past, letting go of the future, we can be here now. We can be present. Aware and relaxed. And experiencing this body that is here now. Letting go of tension and tightness. Relaxing. Relaxing down through the body. Releasing tension, tightness. Becoming soft. Letting go of the bones and muscles so that you're comfortable and at ease. And so with this aware mind that is relaxed and present, we can examine this body, looking at the four elements. We begin with the earth element. And we can feel this earth element in the body. Anywhere there's something hard, firm, like bones, teeth, hair, skin. This is all the earth element. And anything that is soft, like our eyelashes, the hairs on our ears. This is also the earth element. Things that are smooth or rough. the smoothness of our eyeballs, the roughness of our tongue. This is also the earth element. Anything that is heavy, like the weight of our buttocks on our cushion. Or anything that is light. This is also the earth element. Hardness, softness, roughness, smoothness, heaviness and light. All of these things are the earth element. And we can feel them here in this very body. This earth element is not ours, is not unique to us. Just as there is this earth element in our bodies, externally, we can see the earth element in others. Their hair, their skin, and all around us, hardness, softness of the earth. This earth grows our food. We eat this food, bringing the earth element into this body, nourishing us. It stays for a short time and then passes through this body. We don't own it, does not belong to us. This internal and external earth element changing like this. This is not me. This is not mine. This earth element is not myself. This earth element is conditioned. And at the end of my life, this body will return to the earth. Does not belong to me. It's not me. It's not mine. This is not myself. And so why do I become so attached to this form, this earth element? And in the same way, there is water in this body. Tears, saliva, urine, blood, sweat. All this is the water element flowing. Anything that flows is the water element. And water also binds, is cohesive, holding things together. We are 70% water. And all the water in this body comes from outside of ourselves. Rain, humidity. And we take this water in. And it stays in this body for a short time, mixing, mingling, and then is released. How can I say this belongs to me when it is not me? It is not mine. This is not myself. This is borrowed. I can't keep it. Without water, I will quickly die. And at the end of my life, whatever water remains in this body will flow out, dry up, evaporate. It's not me. It does not belong to me. It's not myself. And also in this body, the element of heat, hotness, coldness, our body temperature, that fire in our belly, the digestive juices that transform our food, creating fuel for this body. When we get hot, we get cold, we sweat, we have fever, we shiver. This body, this heat, does not belong to me. It's changing. so affected by external forces. The weather, seasons, time of day. And all the heat on this earth, in this body, comes from the sun, changing seasons as the earth moves through space, changing from day to night, hot to cold as the earth spins. Does not belong to me, is not mine. I can't control it. And at the end of my life, this heat will leave this body. And there's nothing I can do about it. This body will become cold. And in this body is the wind element, air. We breathe in, breathe out, expansion, compression, oscillation, even the rush of blood moving through this body, pushing. This is the air element, the wind pushing. And this is all the gases, all the burps and farts. And this is the space inside as we breathe in, expanding that space of the lungs. We see the wind outside, breathe the air. We're dependent on this atmosphere for every single breath. This is not mine, does not belong to me. We borrow it. Take this air into our lungs, stays for a short time, and then we breathe out. We can't hold on to it. We can't do without it. And at the end of our life, we will take one last breath in and one last breath out. And we won't breathe in again. This is not me. It's not mine. This is not myself. Just constantly changing phenomena, arising, staying for some time, and passing away. And this body, which I am so attached to, my body, really is nothing but constantly changing phenomena, arising, passing away. Seeing in this way, we can ask ourselves, why am I so attached to this body? How do I mistake it for myself? Now, as we come towards the end of this short practice, taking a few moments to review and to reflect. How did it feel to see the body as these elements, this changing phenomenon? Was it difficult, challenging? Was it confronting, scary? And what did you learn about your body by seeing these elements? What did you learn about the truth of our nature? And so now we can relax our awareness, coming back to this body, which we need to continue on this path for the time being, coming back to this room, coming back, opening up your eyes and arising from your meditation. So this is the meditation on the 4 elements, and I hope it was okay for you and that it will be of some benefit to your practice. And so it's not too much of a jump to go from investigating what's really going on in our body to looking at what happens in the rest of the world. And so this topic I want to explore with you tonight is the lokadharmas, the worldly conditions I think that the pandemic really threw these up for us. We had to suddenly take note of these worldly conditions. And I was just thinking, actually, as we're coming out of the meditation, about a conversation I had with Ajahn Brahm. And he was asking me how I was going. I was just ordained as a monk. And he was asking me how I was going. And I was saying I was really happy. You know, I was like, yeah, everything's great. I'm so happy. And he just kind of looked at me and said, it won't last. And I was kind of taken aback. You know, Ajahn Brahm has this way of putting things into perspective sometime. You know, I thought that I'd be happy forever as a monk, you know. I thought that I'd found my place. I thought that everything was stable and permanent. And I thought I had some happiness that I could rely upon. But of course, Ajahn Brahm, with experience and wisdom, could see that perhaps this wasn't the case at all, and that the happiness that I was experiencing would change. And sure enough, nothing lasts forever. And not that I'm unhappy as a monk now, but things did change. I had some bad days. And I think it's important to remember that this is just what it means to be alive. And this is going to happen to us all from time to time. We're going to have our ups and we're going to have our downs. And this really is what it means to exist in the world. This is the nature of the world. This is the nature of samsara. And the way that the Buddha framed this whole mess that we experience from day to day, from year to year, from life to life, was through the lens of what he called the lokadharmas, the worldly conditions, the worldly dharmas. And I think some of you might know them as the worldly winds. And so I've prepared a little bit of a slideshow, just because sometimes, you know, you're doing a Zoom and you end up looking at yourself the whole time. So it's good to change things up. And hopefully you'll be able to see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you for answering. Good. And I'm just going to present. Oh, I've gone the wrong way. I'm going to have to go back. Wait. Oh, now I've ruined it all for you. Started at the very end. Okay. So this is how we survive ups and downs. We look at the lokadharmas and hopefully we'll develop some wisdom. And so I'm going to be looking at one of my favorite suttas, which is called the Dutiya Lokadhamma Sutta. And this means the second sutta on the Lokadharma, or the worldly conditions. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, number 8.6. And I've just extracted really a few bits and pieces from the sutta, and I'll be sharing them here with you. I think it's good to see the words of the Dhamma. So the Buddha is talking to us, and he says these 8 worldly conditions revolve around the world, and the world revolves around these 8 worldly conditions. And so perhaps that's where we get this kind of worldly winds reference in later Buddhist literature, this idea of the worldly conditions pushing their way around, just as the wind moves around the world, clouds move around the world. In the same way, these 8 things that we're about to discover, they revolve around the world and also cause the world to revolve, our worlds at least. What are these 8 things? Unlike the Buddha, he always has a bit of a cliffhanger, some suspense for us. So the first one, and there's 4 pairs. First one is gain and loss, fame and disgrace, blame and praise. And again, the Buddha here switching the positive and the negative, putting blame first instead of praise and blame. And I think that's quite clever because it kind of stops you and makes you think, doesn't it? And then the last one, pleasure and pain. So these are the 8 lokadharmas: gain and loss, fame and disgrace, blame and praise, pleasure and pain. And then he goes on to say that there's 2 types of people in this world. The first person is an uneducated, ordinary person, asutva putujana. And this is people like you and me. Or if you want to think about it, just anyone who is not an Arya, anyone who is not enlightened. That means anyone who is not a stream enterer or above. This is what it means to be an uneducated, ordinary person. Uneducated in the sense of perhaps not seeing the Dhamma. So we all have various degrees of education in the Dhamma, a little bit of knowledge of the Dhamma, and we've heard the teachings, we have some understanding, but until we actually see the Dhamma for ourselves, we're still like a trainee. So we're still ordinary, even if we have some education in the Dhamma. So this is one type of person in the world, a patujana, a worldly person, someone who is ordinary. Ordinary like you and me. Not boring, just ordinary. And the other type of person is an educated, noble disciple. So this is a Sutawato Arya Savaka. So Arya, of course, means a noble being. The Aryas are people who have attained some of the higher stages of the path, the enlightenment stages. So someone who is a stream winner, or a once returner, or a non-returner, or an arahant. These are the fruits of the Buddhist path. And these are people on those paths and who have attained the fruits. So these are people who are educated in the Dhamma, understand the Dhamma, and they are noble because they have attained this path and fruit, and they're like a disciple of the Buddha, someone that follows the Buddhist path and has reached the goal that the Buddha pointed out. So these are the 2 types of people who are going to experience lokadharmas. Both of them experience these worldly conditions, right? So it's not as though those enlightened beings aren't affected by pleasure and pain, aren't affected by gains and loss, or reputation and ill repute, or praise and blame. These things will also happen to those Aryas, which I take comfort from in a way, because it means that there's like this level playing field, everyone experiences them. But what is the difference between the way that these 2 types of people, 2 types of beings, experience the lokadharmas? And so the Buddha goes on to give us, oh, if you've got your microphone on, maybe just check and you can turn it off so that we can not have interruptions. So the Buddha asks, what is the difference between these 2 beings? And he says, when an uneducated, ordinary person encounters gain, etc., they don't reflect that this gain or this praise is impermanent, is suffering, is subject to change. So here we have anicca, impermanent, doesn't last. Suffering, sure or no suffering, that's dukkha. And subject to change here, the word is viparinama. So this is a word that might mean perishing or doesn't stay good, changes. I think Bhante Sujato, when he talks about this, he often talks about it as like the first bite of a brownie is good, the second bite of a brownie is less good. So this is kind of diminishing, perishing. So these three things, when an uneducated, ordinary person encounters one of these lokadharmas, they don't reflect that this is impermanent, suffering, or subject to change. And therefore, they don't see it as it really is. This is yatha bhuta. This is seeing in accordance with reality. So this is why that poor, uneducated, ordinary person is an ordinary person. They haven't seen in accordance with reality. They haven't seen the truth of the Dhamma. And because of this, it obsesses our minds, becomes preponderant in our mind. It fills up our mind. We think about these things. Oh, we want gains. Oh, we don't want loss. Oh, we want praise. We don't want blame. And these things obsess us. They occupy our thoughts. They occupy our whole lives, actually. We're attracted to all these good things. We want gains, we want fame, we want praise, we want pleasure. But we don't want loss. We don't want disgrace or blame. We don't want pain. And because of this, it's going to be a mystery. There we go. Because of this attraction and repulsion, we are not free from rebirth. We're not free from old age, death. We're not free from sorrow, lamentation, pain, sadness, and distress. So therefore, we are not free from suffering. And I think we can see this in our own lives. We can see the pattern that we have trying to avoid those bad things, trying to get those good things, and getting caught up in this cycle of attraction and repulsion. We suffer. And because we suffer, and because we don't see the truth, because we don't get any escape, we keep on coming back over and over again. We keep on experiencing rebirth. We keep on experiencing old age and death. So many countless sorrows and all of these other things that are suffering. But our friend, the educated, noble disciple, our beautiful friend, our Kalyana Mittas, like the Buddha and the Aryas, those enlightened beings, they do reflect with wisdom. So this is the difference between us and them. They do reflect that this is impermanent, that this is suffering. They do see that this is subject to change. And so they see yatha bhuta. They see as it really is, in accordance with the truth of the Dhamma. And because they see clearly, it does not obsess their mind. They know this is just arising and passing. This is suffering coming and suffering going, pleasure coming, pleasure going, gains coming, gains losing, gains. And so a wise person, someone who sees in accordance with reality, is not going to be obsessed by these lokodhammas. They're not going to hanker after fame, gain, and praise and pleasure. They're not going to run away or be repelled from loss, disgrace, blame, and pain. And so because they're not engaged in this running towards and running away from cycle, they're free from rebirth, free from old age, death, free from sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and distress. They're free from suffering. And so essentially, what we have is a difference of view. Those enlightened beings have some right view, a lot of right view. They see in accordance with reality. They see the truth. And for us, our view is so obstructed. And I've used this image here like an analogy. You know, when you hold something close to your face, it looks so big. When you take it away from your face, suddenly it's small, yeah? This is something we get from perspective. At the moment in our life, our problems seem very big. Our suffering, our pandemic woes, our losses, our pain, so big. It occupies our minds, obsesses us, fills up our waking hours, it fills up our life. We have so many of these lokodhammas happening to us every single day. And because of our limited view, our limited perspective, our limited understanding of right view, because of that, this obsession, this infatuation with these things means that these things become so big, so powerful in our lives. But if we had a different view and could see more clearly, those things that seemed really important could be put into perspective. And suddenly they don't seem so grave. They don't seem so wonderful. They're just things arising and passing. And so this different perspective is something that a noble being has. They're able to put, because of their vision and understanding of the true nature of suffering, because they've seen samsara for what it is, because they have a greater breadth of knowledge and understanding, they can see these worldly winds in their proper perspective. The Buddha, he would often talk in the Samyutta Nikaya, in the Anamataka Sutta, Samyutta, these endless beginnings, about how countless lives we've shed so much blood. We've had so many mothers. We've grieved so many tears, more tears than all the water in the ocean. We've lost so many friends and family. We've got so many bones from our past bodies that they would fill up a huge mountain of bones. And when you see like that, when you see the arising and passing of beings through countless lives, start to feel that this life and all of those things are somehow smaller. You can put them into perspective, not be so buffeted by these worldly winds. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of these ways of looking at the Lokadhammas in the suttas, and maybe tell some stories and share some dhamma about these various Lokadhammas. And I'll start, I think, with pain, with dukkha. And doom and gloom continues, ups and downs. Guess what? Dukkha is coming at you first. And in Buddhism, of course, dukkha is such an important concept. And I often think that it's kind of like the Buddha's bingo card is just going to be full of suffering. You know, it's kind of like, have you got rebirth? Yes, good. Have you got pain? Yes. Sorrow? Yes. Have you got old age? Yes. Bingo. We've all got dukkha, right? And of course, the reason that maybe Buddhism gets a bit of a bad reputation sometimes is because people just hear this dukkha, 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 and they think that's all there is. Of course, it's quite different to that. You know, there's a lot of getting over dukkha in Buddhism. There's a lot of escape from dukkha. But the Buddha was kind in that he pointed out that these things are suffering, because so often in our lives we mistake what is suffering for pleasure, and we mistake pleasure for suffering. And so it's important that he's able to point out the true nature of the kind of dukkha that we experience in life, so that we can arouse some samvega, some spiritual urgency. You know, otherwise we're going to get used to this kind of dukkha. We're not going to see it clearly. And if we're not going to see it clearly, then we're not going to want to escape it. And so the Buddha was kind in this kind of pointing out of dukkha over and over and over again, because it works on our view. We can straighten our view by understanding, by seeing that these things are suffering. And when we can see in this way, we can start to become dispassionate about it. We can start to let go of those things that cause us suffering. We can generate this samvega, this desire to escape our suffering. And so dukkha is very important, but it's something that we experience and it hurts. And that's another definition of dukkha, is pain. You know, this kind of physical pain, this mental pain. And this is something that affects us in our life. And if you think about it, the pain that we experience is a major push towards pleasure. We think that we can escape pain by seeking pleasure. Then, of course, our pains don't go away, and often our pleasures turn into pains. You think you will escape hunger by eating a whole chocolate cake, then you will just be sick and hungry again tomorrow. So we can't escape these things. But we can develop some wisdom around them. The Buddha said in the Mahali Sutta, which is in the Samyutta Nikaya, the dukkha that we experience is related to the experience of the khandhas. So in the bigger definition that the Buddha gives, which I kind of referred to just before, which is that rebirth, suffering is rebirth, old age, sickness, death, pain, sorrow, lamentation, grief, and despair. These are all forms of suffering. And then to make sure we didn't miss it, he said, basically, this is the whole mass of suffering, the Mahadukkha Khandha. And in short, it's the 5 clinging aggregates that is dukkha, the 5, the Pancha Upadana khandhas. And these are form. We looked at form just before when we did our guided 4 elements meditation. We looked at form, which of course are the elements. And then we've got feelings, which we think of as pleasure and pain and neutral feelings. And then we have perceptions, how we see the world. We have sankharas, which are our choices and will. our volitions. And then we have consciousness, which we mistake for ourselves, this conjurer's trick, Buddha said. So these 5 khandhas are suffering, are dukkha, and this is how we experience the world. And so in this sutta, the Mahali Sutta, the Buddha talks about how our experience of the khandhas is mixed with pleasure and pain. So it's not exclusively pleasurable and it's not exclusively painful. And this is good, because if it was only pleasurable, our experience of this body and this mind, if it was only pleasurable, then we would just want to keep it forever. And we would want to keep on having bodies. We would want to keep on coming back over and over again. We wouldn't have any reason to get out of this body. But because there is suffering, because there is pain, because we experience it mixed with pleasure, that pleasure is not so pleasurable, because it changes from pleasure to pain really quickly. And because there is this suffering, this pain, then it's good for us because we can become dispassionate. That pain is what makes us want to get out of suffering, and getting out of suffering is in our long-term interest. And so there's many types of suffering. There's suffering that is heavy and suffering that is light. There's suffering that is mental and suffering that is physical. There's suffering that is takes a long time to go away, and there's suffering that is short. And this is what it means to be alive. This is what it means to have a body, a mind. And so when we accept this, we can kind of make peace with it, right? You know, Ajahn Brahm would say things like, "Are you suffering?" And people would say yes, and he'd say, "Good, good." And the reason is it can't last. You know, this suffering can't last either. And this is how we should see it. It is impermanent. It does change. And so even when we're having a really hard day, even when things look really, really bad, then sure, things can always get worse. But usually when we experience suffering for some time, eventually some happiness will come along. This suffering is not permanent, but neither is the pleasures we experience. And that's the problem. When we experience pleasure, we want it to last forever. We think it will last forever. We hope it will last forever, but it never does. And the pleasures that we seek, what kind of pleasures are they? Most of the time, they're sensory pleasures, pleasures that occupy our senses, our sights, sounds, feelings, tastes, smells. These are the things that we seek. Even the pleasures of the mind, interesting ideas, thoughts, concepts. These are things that we take pleasure in. And in the Patalaya Sutta, which is a sutta I often teach, Majjhima Nikaya number 54, we find the Buddha talking about how these pleasures are full of drawbacks and dangers. He compares it to a bone that's been well scraped clean of meat. This bone given to a dog. This poor dog gets the taste and the flavor of the meat that's left on that bone that's been scraped clean, but never truly gets satisfied, cannot truly be nourished by that bone. There's no meat on that bone to nourish it. So it has the flavor, but no nourishment. He says that our sensual pleasures are like birds fighting over a scrap of meat. You know, so competitive. We have to compete with people for things. Or like a grass torch in the wind. We hold this torch up, and if we're not careful, the flame from that torch blown by the wind will burn our face. We're so easily burnt by these pleasures. all those things that we search for, all those things that we want to be permanent and pleasurable, that will last forever and keep us happy, all those things are impermanent and they won't make us happy. And so when we think about these lokodharmas, sure, we experience pleasure and pain. What kind of experience of pleasure is going to help us? And the Buddha says sensory pleasures aren't going to help you, but he's not going to leave us just in suffering. He offers an alternative path. He offers us meditation, the bliss of the mind that doesn't rely upon these external stimuli, these external pleasures, which are so unsatisfactory, which are so impermanent and changeable. So we develop our mind through meditation so that we can experience the bliss, the happiness, the sukha of these unworldly states of meditation. Of course, these states also don't last, but they're on the path towards a permanent eradication of suffering, which is enlightenment. And so in some ways, they're like a little taste of enlightenment, especially these deep states of meditation, like jhanas. These are like the flavor of nirvana. And so this is pleasure, this is pain. We're going to experience pleasure and pain every day of our life, every moment, moving from pleasure to pain, pleasure to pain. And how we need to view it is with wisdom, straightening our view, developing right view, developing understanding, seeing these things as impermanent, seeing even those pleasures as suffering, certainly seeing suffering as suffering, being able to identify suffering and seeing it as changing, subject to change. In this way, we incline the mind towards understanding, towards seeing. We're developing this thing, ujjukaditi, seeing, straightening our view. And this is how we make progress on the path. So this is pleasure and pain, and gains and loss is something I wanted to talk about. And I had one of those days today. You know, monks have a particular kind of suffering, and that is the suffering of monks. And lay people have the kind of suffering of lay people. And for me today, I was at an alms round, and Bhante Sujata wasn't around. He was out today. And there was a lot of kind people who came to offer dana on our Pindapata round. And so many kind people, in fact, that I was completely overwhelmed. And even though I didn't accept all the food that I was offered because I just couldn't carry it, I had these gains, but I also had some suffering because of it. And then just when I thought I was going to get away, a man that I see often on Pindapata, and we haven't done Pindapata for such a long time, a man came up and said, "Let me buy you some sweets." And I was like, "Oh, my friend, I have so much food." And I never like to say no when people are generous. And he said, no, come, because it's Diwali. So he wanted to buy some sweets. And he said, come. And he took me to the sweet shop. And he said, just wait here. I'll get you some sweets. And so then, because of COVID restrictions and because of Diwali, service was very slow. And I think I was there probably about half an hour all up waiting because there's so many people and they could only serve a few people at once. And so I had all this gains, all this food, and I was standing there, I was weighed down by, a heavy bowl, my bag, I had some other bags, and then he gave me these sweets. And there's only so much I can eat, And so this is the kind of suffering that comes for monks and nuns sometimes. When people are so generous, we have the problem of being well fed, right? And I was remembering back to our very first Pindapatas, when I was so worried that we weren't going to get anything, that we would have no gains. And this is how it is to live. We are constantly worried about not getting enough of this or that. We want gains. We want things like possessions, food. We want nice things, nice possessions. We want enough. We want more than enough. We want more and more gains. We want more money, a better house, a better job. This is what we look for in our lives. And we're afraid to lose it. We're afraid of loss. We don't want our share price to go down. We don't want our house value to drop. We don't want to lose our job. We don't want to lose our nice new mobile phone. We don't want to lose anything. We want to keep things as much as we can. And the reason I mentioned this incident at Pindapar today about gains and loss is because the Buddha recognized that even monks who have so little and who have so few opportunities to get things, even this is a huge barrier to making progress in the path. Wanting gains, wanting nice food. He said for monks and nuns that gains, reputation and having followers, these three things are a source of suffering. They are harsh, bitter, brutal barrier and obstruction to finding peace. And I could see that today, you know, I was like, you go out on arms round, you hope that you'll get some gains, you hope you get some food, and then suddenly you get some and you've got too much and it becomes suffering. Or then what to do? I was like, oh, I'm not going to be able to eat this. Can I share it with some people? Can I give some away? Can I give some to the pigeons? And the idea of loss, even losing this stuff, was occupying my mind. And so gains and loss, ups and downs. The Buddha said it's so dangerous to think about these things all the time for monks, worrying about food, worrying about accommodation, worrying about robes and things like that. He gives some beautiful examples in the suttas, in the Samyutta Nikaya, three of my favorite little creatures. First one is this kuma, a tortoise, which is swimming with its family in the ocean. And they say, don't go over there. Don't go over to that spot over there. There's trouble waiting. And this tortoise is quite naughty, goes over there. And then he goes back to swim with his family. And his family say, did you go over there where we told you not to go? He says, yes. It's like, well, we can see that you're hooked. You know, he got hooked by a fisherman's hook, but this tortoise couldn't see it himself. And of course, eventually that tortoise will be reeled in. He's going to be snagged by those gains. This is the metaphor. And so it's so easy to become hooked, even without knowing it, for things. And another in the same Samyutta, in the same chapter, is the dung beetle, which is, of course, a creature that eats poo. And so the dung beetle had this big pile of poo and is sitting on top of these gains, sitting on top of these balls of poo, and is really proud of itself, proud of its poo. And, you know, this is sometimes like us, you know, maybe you're a collector, you have all of your collections of things, and you can be quite proud of that, you know, but this is just stuff. It's not a source of happiness. We welcome people into our homes. We become so proud of these possessions. And here the Buddha saying, it's just shit, really. This stuff doesn't matter. The problem is that we identify with it, just like we identify with pleasure and pain, just like we identify with this body, and this earth element, this water element. We identify with it, and that identification becomes the suffering. Because we think of this as mine, my pile of dung, my fancy things. And if any of that changes, if someone takes away our fancy things or they break, someone takes away our gains, if we experience loss, then we suffer because we were so attached and so enmeshed with that idea that these gains were permanent, pleasurable, unchanging. We identified with those things, and so we suffer. And another creature in the same samyutta is the jackal, which has mange. This poor jackal, wherever it goes, thinking about gains, wanting good things, wanting a good reputation, wanting to have followers. For a monk, this is very dangerous. And so the Buddha said this is like a jackal that has mange. And wherever it goes, it's itchy. It never gets any peace. These are really powerful images that the Buddha uses to make us think about these things. And we can think about it regardless of whether we're a monk or a layperson. We can think about our attitude towards these things and see that the connection that we make with these things can be a source of suffering for us. It doesn't mean as lay people that you can't enjoy your gains, but how you enjoy them, that's important. You enjoy them thinking that they'll last forever, well, you're going to suffer. If you enjoy them thinking that they're yours, well, they're going to be taken away from you. Something's going to break, someone might steal it, taxman will take cut. It doesn't belong to you. And if you think that you're going to enjoy them forever, then you're wrong. So when we have gains, we should use what we have for what we need, share what we need, what we have with others, keep a little bit spare for a rainy day, and do good with what we have. And this kind of gain is long-lasting. This kind of gain, what's given, the Buddha says, cannot be lost. When we're generous and kind, when we give, can't be lost. We've given it. And the good karma, the good merit that we have from that lasts a long time. And so it's better to if you're going to experience loss, to do it yourself through renunciation, through generosity, than have it taken away. And whatever we get, we should share. This is a good way to live, according to the Buddha. Looking at the time, don't have terribly long to go. So I'll whiz through the next two couplets, which are disgrace and fame. So, of course, these also occupy our minds quite a lot. So fame is having followers, just like on Facebook. It is like Instagram or TikTok. It is worrying how many people are going to turn up to a Dharma talk. It is thinking about how many people saw that video that I posted on YouTube. It is comparing myself to someone like Ajahn Brahm, who gets millions of views for his talks. Of course, if you start to identify it with a reputation, then you're going to suffer, because this reputation is so fragile, so changeable. We want to be regarded well. We want people to think good of us, and that's okay. We don't want people to think that we're bad. We don't want people to think that we've done bad things. And of course, the best way to avoid people thinking that we're doing bad things is to not do bad things. But a lot of this is so out of our control. I was thinking of the royal family and how they have fame, but their fame is kind of like a real suffering. And Hollywood actors, there's this kind of microscope on their lives. This fame shows up everything. And then eventually, you know, as we kind of put the microscope onto a part of their lives, we'll find something that makes us think less of them. And then that reputation that was good changes. We see something about them that we don't like. We hear something about them that they did wrong. And very quickly, changing, that fame becomes ill repute. That good reputation becomes disgrace. And in our own lives, in so many ways, this is happening all the time. We even see things like poor celebrities who have aged badly, kind of getting shamed. You know, oh, he's really let himself go. You know, oh, can you believe what she looks like now? You know, it's so easy for this reputation to change. Even great people of the past who were previously lauded, when we examine them more closely, their reputation becomes tarnished. All those statues of colonial leaders being pulled down by later generations. So these things are so difficult for us to judge, so difficult for us to know whether a person is deserving of a reputation or deserving of ill repute. So difficult for others to know that of us. And so then why do we get so caught up with worrying what other people think about us? So impossible for us to control. And in any case, identifying too strongly with being a good person like this or being a bad person like that, being a good person in their eyes might be being a bad person in someone else's eyes. Being a good person in our eyes might not be valued by others. And so the Buddha advises us to not become too obsessed by fame, by ill repute, not to worry too much. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have regard for how we behave. It doesn't mean that we can just do whatever we want. I mean, a good reputation is important. And this is one way that some of the chanting that we do about the Buddha starts off. You know, the Buddha had this good reputation, and the qualities that the Buddha has, these qualities are beautiful. These qualities are worthy. And these qualities will inspire the mind and lead us in the right direction. It doesn't mean that the Buddha didn't have a bad reputation among some circles of people. He was criticized. It doesn't mean that the Buddha won't have a good reputation forever, or that the Buddha won't have a bad reputation in some circles in the future also. Who knows? Buddha wasn't concerned by such things. He was concerned with escaping suffering. And if we're concerned about escaping suffering, then we can sit a little bit loosely to how people think about us. Of course, we want to be praised for doing good. We don't want to be blamed. So these are the next two of the Loka Dharmas. We want to be praised because we're ethical and virtuous, because we're generous. These are things that the Buddha said are praiseworthy. He also said that no one who's ever lived, this is the Dhammapada, verse 228, maybe, that no one who has ever lived has been wholly praised or wholly criticized. It's a mix. No one is loved by everyone. No one is hated by everyone. Even the worst people have friends. Even the most blamed have some praiseworthy qualities. This is a kind of mixed way of being. In our lives, we'll have some praise. In our lives, we'll be blamed. It'll come to us, it'll arise, stay for some time, and it will pass away. And our job is not to get too involved in identifying with the praise or identifying with the blame. We will suffer if we always need praise. We will suffer if we blame ourselves all the time. We need to have a healthy relationship with praise and blame. We need to understand sometimes I do things that might not be praiseworthy, and that praise might be valid. Sometimes I am praised for things I didn't do. Sometimes I'm blamed for things I didn't do. Sometimes there may be things that I should be blamed for. We need to have a balanced mind about these things. The Buddha said that we should praise what is praiseworthy and abandon what is unpraiseworthy. And for Buddhists, we have to be very careful that just because we understand that these are loka dhammas, that there will be praise coming, blame coming, it doesn't mean that it's like a get out of jail free card for us. Sure, there's praise. Sure, there's blame. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't behave in a way that is praiseworthy. Doesn't mean that if we've done something wrong, we shouldn't be blamed. We shouldn't just see these loka dhammas as things that just happen and doesn't matter, doesn't belong to us. Sure, it doesn't belong to us in the same way that we might think about it if we identify with it too strongly, but if there's reason for it, then we should be aware and understand, I'm being praised because I did something praiseworthy, or I'm being blamed because I did something wrong. These two things, although they're loka dhammas, will help us on the path. Being aware of hurting ourselves or hurting others, something that is blameful, we should abandon. Instead, we should cultivate the anavajja, the blameless, so that we can experience the anavajja sukha, the bliss of blamelessness. And of course, praising what is virtuous, what is beautiful, what is ethical, praising generosity, praising wisdom. These are things that will help us grow on the spiritual path. And knowing how easy it is to praise and blame, we can help others cultivate these good things by being careful about how we blame. Be gentle, be kind, praise when people do good things, lifts them up, encourages them. Blame can really put people down, hurt people, and cause a lot of self-esteem issues and things like that. And so do what's praiseworthy, avoid what is blameworthy, but understand that regardless of what you do, there'll be praise and there'll be blame coming at you in any case, at work, in your relationships, with your family, all over the place, because these things are loka dhammas. And so we're coming towards the end of this talk about the loka dhammas. I just want to share some quick tips, survival tips for ups and downs. So the first thing is to remember it's okay. You're okay. You're experiencing the loka dhammas. Stuff happens. It's really important that we don't repress these things and have exaggerated detachment about them. If we're experiencing pain, we need to understand I'm experiencing pain. When a gain comes to me, we identify it. I'm going up. This is good. We need to know that it won't last. We need to see that it's changing and full of suffering, but we need to understand this is happening. So with spiritual bypassing, we are exaggeratedly detached, or we think we have equanimity, but in fact we're numbing ourselves and emotionally repressing stuff. And so we see these things as impermanent, just like those aryas do. We understand these are just arising and passing away. We straighten our view. We can practice patience, khanti, patience, patient endurance. And we can put things into perspective by understanding the bigger picture of samsara. We can contemplate impermanence, understanding through meditations on the breath, seeing the impermanence of each and every breath, or on the four elements, or on Vedana, the impermanence of feelings in the body, or death. You can see impermanence in this way. And this helps us to accept the changing nature of our reality. And we can develop right view, seeing in accordance with reality. And we can develop equanimity. But equanimity is something, proper equanimity is something that happens a long way down the path when we have understanding and wisdom. We kind of fake it till we make it, I think, with the kind of equanimity that people often speak about, the way they kind of perhaps see themselves as being neutral, can often be like a way of numbing, or people who practice equanimity sometimes mistake detachment for equanimity. And this isn't quite the same. Equanimity is really seeing what's happening and being stable and steady anyway. And so this verse, to finish up, from the Mangala Sutta, Putasa lokadamhe chitam yasana kampati asokam urajam ke mang ertang mangan utananti. Though touched by these lokadharmas, these worldly conditions, our mind does not tremble. It is sorrowless, stainless, and secure. This is the highest blessing. And this idea of being untouched by these worldly conditions, this isn't the kind of detachment or emotional numbing or suppression that some people in spiritual circles might use in their lives and mistake for equanimity, mistake for overcoming those lokadharmas. This kind of equanimity belongs to the Aryas, belongs to those enlightened beings. When you look at that Mangala Sutta, there's so many things that happen, so many blessings that happen before we get to that stage of equanimity, before we get to that unshakable, steady, sorrowless stage. And until then, we're worldly beings, ordinary people, patujanas. We're going to experience these things, and it's the way that we respond to them that matters. So we need to develop this resilience. We need to develop this perspective and understanding. We need to develop wisdom. And until we see these things for ourselves, we're still going to experience pain and suffer. We're still going to experience gains and think that it will last forever. We've got to want pleasure to stay. We've got to still run away from suffering. But as long as we have this education in the Dhamma, we can start to slowly loosen our attachment to these things. We can stop identifying so strongly with them, and we can sit a bit more loosely to life. We can start to see these things coming and arising and passing away. And this is the development of our mind. This is the development of wisdom. And this is how eventually we will become sorrowless and stainless, how we will become unshakable, and eventually, hopefully, we will become Aryas. And those lokadharmas, although they'll still be existing in the world, we will see them clearly, recognizing them for what they are, and eventually will come out of our suffering. So this is a short talk about ups and downs and how to survive them with wisdom. Wisdom power is the way to survive the ups and downs. So we've gone a little bit over time. I don't want to get in trouble, but if anyone has a question, perhaps we can take a few questions before we wrap up.